committee was illegitimate. The resolution was introduced by Congressman Eric Burleson from Missouri, along with 24 other members. And let's bring in for discussion a legal perspective, constitutional attorney and former U.S. Navy JAG officer, Don Brown. Don, thank you so much for joining Special Report.
It's good to be here, ladies. Thanks for having me back.
Oh, well, Don, we've been talking about this a lot on this show. So, what can Congress do and why should they do this and why this is a good step that we're seeing right now?
All those are great questions, Tara. Congress can do, as these two congressmen, Burleson and Massey, have now advocated, rescind the subpoenas with regard to both Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro, rescind the January 6th committee. But above and beyond that, Congress also has the power to rescind the contempt itself, the contempt finding. If you do that, then the potential jail time that Steve is facing becomes moot. It gives his lawyers something to work with. Why? But why should this happen? Because every member of that United States House of Representatives, including the Speaker, if you hear me, Mr. Speaker, took an oath to defend the Constitution. What we are seeing now with these political prosecutions, and specifically now with the Bannon case, which they can do something about, is selective prosecution, which violates the right of due process and of equal protection. Congress is there to exert checks and balances against an out-of-control judiciary. And this is an opportunity for Congress not just to protect Bannon, but for more important reasons, to defend the Constitution, to take a step to right this wrong and send a message, we're not going to have this anymore. They should rescind the subpoena. They should rescind the contempt finding. And yes, they should also rescind all the work of the January 6th committee, which is a kangaroo court, if you ask my opinion about it.
Absolutely. Well, Don, I mean, let's just talk about this blatant, in-your-face, two-tiered system of justice that the Democrats are not even afraid anymore to be doing. I mean, let's be real. So here you have Biden's Department of Justice coming out and saying, you know what, we will not prosecute Attorney General Merrick Garland after he was held in contempt of Congress. But rules, they don't seem to apply to them. This, of course, he's being sued even by left mainstream media like CNN for not producing those audio tapes with Biden and special counsel Robert Hur. But somehow, the rules don't apply to him. Don, really?
Miranda, you make a great point. The DOJ saying we're not going to prosecute Biden is like giving the fox the keys to the hen house. You've already seen the damage there. All the feathers are laying all over, and the blood laying all over the cage, and you're giving the fox the key to the hen house. Listen, there has not been a prosecution for contempt of Congress in the United States in a half a century. Last time was G. Gordon Liddy. And you have multiple Democrats either be held in contempt or violating subpoenas, never once prosecuted until you come to Bannon and until you come to Navarro. And by the way, Steve Bannon wrote a letter to the committee offering to testify, and the whole purpose of contempt anyway is to try to force compliance with the subpoena. He wrote a letter offering to testify at the very end when President Trump said, hey, go right ahead, we're not going to waive executive privilege, and they still decided to prosecute him. This is an egregious case of prosecuting Republicans, letting Democrats look. It's selective prosecution, and the Speaker of the House needs to deliver here. We've heard enough of complaints and whining and moaning, but we need to deliver. Here's an opportunity to deliver by taking this before the House now, and by rescinding that subpoena, and by rescinding the contempt finding, and by ending the J6 committee once and for all.
Yeah, Don, I'm with you. We need to see action here. And I just returned from attending Turning Point Action's People's Convention in Detroit. Such a great event. And let me tell you, this two-tiered system of justice, it was a main topic of concern. So much so that you actually saw voters switch over because of their fear that it could happen to them next. I mean, how concerned should Americans be? As Trump says all the time, they are not coming after me. They're coming after you. I'm just standing in the way.
Yeah. Extremely concerned, because these political prosecutions aren't just against big politicians like President Trump. Listen, they prosecuted the McCloskeys out in St. Louis for standing in front of their house with guns trying to protect their property. They never even shot at anybody. They prosecuted pro-life fathers like Mark Houck and Paul Vaughn in Pennsylvania and Tennessee after the Dobbs decision reversed Roe versus Wade, simply because of their political thoughts. You know that it is a problem if you step out as an average American and speak out against something the deep state doesn't believe in, you're subject to prosecution. And they use these vague, crazy conspiracy theories where they don't have a direct, real reason to prosecute. They're going after Trump electors, alternate electors. There's no statute preventing an alternate elector being submitted. It happened in 1960 in Hawaii. In the Nixon versus Kennedy case, nobody said a word. It's not a crime, but they make these crimes up. And I've been calling for this for some time. We've got to enact rogue prosecutor laws, both at the state and the federal level, so that if these prosecutors judge on the backside or a judge who have brought any prosecution primarily for political reasons, they ought to be subject to felony prosecution themselves. It's time to take action.
Yeah. Don, I want to go back to this Garland subpoena for just a minute, because I really think it's important to hone in on the powers and the authority that Congress has for oversight. You know, Kash Patel has a really interesting theory out. He's, of course, a former federal prosecutor himself and former advisor to President Trump. Well, he's come out and said that Congress actually has the authority to arrest and detain Attorney General Garland for refusing to comply with that subpoena, and saying, you know, they can instruct the sergeant at arms to hold him in detention until he complies. Most people don't realize Congress has that kind of authority.
Yep.
You know, why aren't they using it?
Well, they're afraid to use it. Obviously, you got to have some guts to do that. But in fact, Congress has exercised that power. In fact, the U.S. Supreme Court in 1927, in a case called Doherty versus McGrain, the Senate actually arrested Mr. Doherty, who was the brother of the former Attorney General, and held him for several days. And the Supreme Court said that is part of Congress's inherent power to enforce its subpoenas, and checked off on that. In 1934, William McCracken was given 10 days by the Senate. The Senate arrested him as well. And of course, they haven't done that in recent years, but Congress has absolute authority by a majority of vote to authorize the arrest of the Attorney General or anyone else. And by the way, going back to the Doherty case, Mr. Doherty wasn't even held in contempt. He was prosecuted for failing to comply with the subpoena. They didn't take the next step and hold him in contempt, kind of like Hunter Biden. But the authority is there. The legal authority is there. The Supreme Court has said the legal authority is there. That case I just cited, Doherty and McCain, that goes back to the Teapot Dome scandal. But it is there. The authority is there. There's not a question about it. The issue is whether or not the Speaker has the political will to really, I hate to put it as we put it in North Carolina, but put his money where his mouth is.
Yeah, exactly. We only have about 40 seconds. So again, we've broken down, and thank you, Don, for the legalities and what Congress can and cannot do, and describe, obviously, the two tiers of justice. But more importantly, 30 seconds to you. Do you think Republicans will do that? Because July 1st is right around the corner, and that is where Steve Bannon is supposed to turn himself into a prison. So time is of the essence. Do you think he'll do it? And what do you think will happen to Merrick Garland?
I don't think so. I don't, based upon the track record of our Republicans in the Congress, they've been weak-kneed. And until they prove the other side, I don't think they will. But we've got to have action if we're going to save this republic. And the Speaker, if he's going to show his worth, he needs to be a leader here and attack in these crucial areas where our Constitution is being threatened with these political prosecutions. Bannon, Garland, the president, whatever, Congress needs to act.
They do. Time is of the essence. Don Brown, thank you so much. We'll continue to follow this as always, and encourage you to share this, because Tara, you actually broke this last week and nobody was really talking about it. We were talking about it here on this show. No one really even brought this up. And that makes you wonder, why didn't they bring this up?
Well,
they
I
should
think,
know.
yeah, I mean, our founding fathers set up our system of government to really have the legislative branch hold the judicial branch at check.
Right.
And they're not using the authorities that they were given.
But now you know that they do have that authority. Coming up, the state